Wonderful. Well, let's get started. My name is Manish Waltherpuri. I'm really excited to be here with you. And I feel very privileged that the CyberSaint team, Jerry and Allison, asked me to speak about my experience at the city of New York. Since leaving the city, I've been selective about when I talk about it. And I'll tell you more about why that is, but I chose this venue very intentionally because it's a CyberSaint doing this conference is a free virtual event. Of course, started during the pandemic, but the fact that they've continued to do so and are committed to it is one of the many reasons I agreed to do this, because it's about sharing this experience and about continuing to share the insights that I got. That's part of the service that I did. So I'm very happy to be here. I welcome your questions in the chat. I will do my best to monitor them as we're going along. But thank you for your patience as I look at those. So first, foremost, if you've never heard a government or former government official speak before, then this disclaimer will be new to you. But if not, then you have. And that is that what I'm about to share with you are my thoughts and my thoughts alone. They do not represent the city of New York or New York City Cyber Command, or any of my current or former employers. This is genuinely, truly my experience. With that out of the way, I will also say that I was part of a team. I'm wearing this hoodie. I haven't worn it in a long time. This hoodie, can you see it? This is New York City Cyber Command. There's a cool patch over here, some stuff on the back. A friend of mine made it. This is the only hoodie like this in the world that exists. That's pretty cool. I feel pretty lucky about that. It was custom made. I wore it and wear it with a lot of pride. And for a couple reasons. Hackers always thought of as black hoodies, and black is meant to be like in the darkness and hidden. And I can't think of something that's more opposite than that. Bright orange, construction orange. And that's intentional. Not, hey, we're here, come check us out. But when do you have orange? Heads up, watch out, construction. Something might hurt you, and we're here to make sure that you're okay. Think about an orange cone, that kind of idea. And then the other is, it's a reminder for me. I don't need to be reminded, but it's a wonderful, nostalgic reminder that I was part of a pretty incredible team of people, always part of a team. And sometimes, and a few times, people have said, thank you for your service. And I always say back to them, I was part of a team. So on behalf of all of those people, you're welcome. But it was never me, never just me. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about me in a very existential way. Who am I? Why am I here? I gave you the why I'm here. So who am I? I'm someone who has crossed a number of different domains. I've worked in different types of risk and security and intelligence over the course of my career. Started in nuclear policy. I say that with a little bit of surprise, and then sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's where it started. International affairs, worked on terrorism, fraud, supply chain, obviously cybersecurity, cyber investigations, and intelligence. And for the city of New York, I was the director of cyber risk. What have I done with my life? Why did I put this question in here? Why would I dare answer this question right now? The truth is, I do think about not as my sole identity, as part of what I do. And I hope you'll understand that better over the course of this presentation. But at its core, what I think I do is help people understand uncertainty and make decisions about it. Help people understand uncertainty and make decisions about it. Those decisions can vary. In this case, it was, how do we sustainably and measurably reduce cyber risk to the city of New York? That was the question that I lived every day. So I'm going to share with you now, for the first time really, some of the really crucial lessons that I learned. And here they are. So here's everything that I learned. I know it's just 6 words right now, but encapsulating these 6 words, it's a really important and hard lessons that I learned that I believe apply to anybody working in cybersecurity at any level. Say that again. Anyone working in cybersecurity at any level. So if you want, you can take a screenshot of this. My slides are not super exciting, I must warn you. They're pretty much all text. I did that intentionally. I had a bunch of memes and GIFs. It was going to be great. And then I was like, let me keep this really tight, really simple, really clear. I want you to be able to take these things away with you today, later today, tomorrow, for them to ricochet around in your brain. And then also years from now, when you get that role where you're going to need some of these hard lessons. So here they are: trust, scale, services, priorities, cost, imagination. Let me start with the first, which I don't know if I would say is the most important, but is the most salient. It stayed with me and stays with me today, which is this: securing technology is about trust between humans. This statement is either going to be patently obvious to you or curious. And either way, I'll share with you what it means to me. I spent a lot of my time thinking about how the city of New York serves New Yorkers and what is the technology underneath that service. And how might that technology be exploited or misused intentionally? How can it be defended and protected? And how will we know that we're defending it well? That was me. That was my job and my team. How will we know that we're defending it well enough? And what I learned is that over and over and over, it was not just about the tools and the tradecraft that we had. And in fact, that was necessary and very often insufficient. No big secret about that. The most important thing were our relationships with people at other agencies. I won't weigh you down too much, not because I think it's relevant, but because I don't want to get distracted about the dynamics of the agency that I worked for and other agencies. All that's important is that we were one agency and there were other agencies. And there were people at those other agencies that focused on other things. Homeless services, the fire department, Department of Education, Department of Finance. They all had different missions and different ways that they served New Yorkers. In the end, we needed to get somebody to do a thing. That's it. That's what securing technology was in many cases. I'm not saying it because in a reductive way, it might sound simple. It was not easy. Securing that technology was about getting that person to do that thing. So it wasn't simply about persuasion or negotiation, or definitely not about shame or fear. But it was fundamentally about the trust that we had built to that other person. If we had an incident, getting someone to respond was not a function of the urgency, import, scale, or severity of that incident. It was the strength of the relationship. If I can twist this on its head, when you're on your computer, on your browser, the strength of the connection here that you're getting through Zoom might not be about Zoom. It might be about your Wi-Fi connection, your local connection, the strength of that signal. That was what was important. If we got someone to patch something, let me say it differently. If we needed a vulnerability to be patched, it was about picking up the phone, not sending an email, not sending an alert. We had those things. We had platforms and tools. And this is what's really important when you're designing a platform or using a platform. What is the human element here? How is that person going to know that they should do that thing? And then after they've done that thing, they've done the right thing, and really calibrate that. That's with another person. That fundamentally is one of my most crucial lessons, which is why I spent so much time on it. The next thing I learned is that scale can change severity. In cybersecurity, we think a lot about severity, and I don't just mean the CVSS score. Try not to use jargon here, but I don't just mean technically how bad is it. I do mean that. I don't just mean that. Sometimes how bad is it it could be really bad if it was really widespread. Now, again, this is going to seem patently obvious to you or curious. Unfortunately, we had a recent demonstration of this. There were millions of computers that got the blue screen of death. The blue screen of death is bad. It's not the worst thing that can happen to a computer or technology writ large. It really isn't. But it's bad. But for millions of computers that are crucial to transportation and emergency public safety systems, then it becomes really bad. So scale, the challenge here for you is that the next time you're thinking about an incident, don't just measure how bad it is there, but think about scale. What if it's not that bad, but happens across a lot of organizations or layers of technology, or a piece of technology that is ubiquitous across a lot of different environments? New York City has a little over 200 agencies. Now, of course, it's intuitive that if something affects a majority of those, it would be really bad, to use the non-technical term. But it took some time to integrate that thinking into our risk analysis. We were looking agency by agency or technology by technology. And to think at scale, you have to press out, actively press out. That's hard to do in the moment because you're already talking about something going bad. And so it seems like you might be distracting from that focus on the bad thing. But in fact, it's a different angle to think about how bad something can be. Also, if you're working on third-party issues or any cyber supply chain issues, this is going to be at the core of how we think about scale, how we think about scale and the breadth and width of disruption. So this is a lesson that I would say I learned before joining the city, but I honed while there. What matters, and I tried really hard not to use technical terms, any cyber terms here. What matters is what you care about losing most, and that should say will notice first. What matters is what you care about losing most and will notice first. And really the intersection of those two. So let's talk about this for a minute. Sometimes in security, people ask people not in security, what's important to you? What? I don't know, running the business, making money, shareholder value, winning? Like, what do you mean? What's most important to you? That's a very hard question for people to answer. You know, it's not a hard question. What do you care most about losing? What do you care most about losing? Answer that question yourself. Today, what do you care most about losing? Probably isn't going to be money. Health, family, privacy, freedom, truth. There's data and technology tied to each of those. And there's a really good chance that you don't have control over that data or technology. Now, I'm not meaning to scare or provide any fear, rather to say the framing, prospect theory, if you know about it, or loss aversion, how you frame what someone is going to gain or lose is going to change how much investment they put in it. What you care most about losing will immediately prioritize what's important and what you might notice first. So in the context of the city and in general, if you ask people, what are they going to notice first? You don't have to think about it too much. Like if you're on the subway and the subway stops working, you're going to notice. If the power goes out in a building and there aren't any windows around, you will notice. But if there are windows around, you might not immediately notice. You'll be on your computer and then you'll realize, okay. And those are bad. And we all agree that those are bad. And that's going to be a problem. But what if we couldn't pick up trash? That might take a little bit to notice, but when we notice, it's going to be pretty strong. What about being able to send a fire engine to an exact location? If you're not calling the fire department, you might not notice. You might not even care. But if it's your house that's on fire, if it's your building that's on fire, you absolutely care. Why am I saying this? These sound like really obvious things. I'm saying this because this is a really important frame to think about the people that you are working with, for, and serving in terms of the technology they use. Go to them, understand how they see the world. What do they measure success in? What are they most afraid of losing? Then put technology on top of it. Then figure out what technology fits in. That is how I learned to effectively prioritize where to put our resources and attention, which gets me to the next lesson, which is not a pithy statement, but is 3 elements. And here they are: measure, prioritize, communicate. I spent a lot of time thinking about risk and cyber risk, identifying, analyzing, assessing, mitigating. None of those are on here. Not because I aced it, but because that's not where the hard part was. The hard part was this: measuring, prioritizing, communicating. So measuring. I think the greatest risk to any organization is how they measure risk. Plain and simple. If you're not measuring the right risks in the right way, you will be surprised. So how bad? Whenever I would get a numerator, and I always thought about it as a numerator, we have X thousands of endpoints that are exposed in this way, or these many assets that are vulnerable. I would ask myself, and sometimes out loud, because I was one of those people, is that a lot? Is that a lot? Give me the denominator. Tell me something comparative. In modern day business, we don't make decisions based on red, yellow, green. We don't. The CFO doesn't go, how are we, tell the CEO, how are we doing this quarter? He says yellow. It doesn't happen. You can't always put numbers to it, but you have to be able to measure. This is hard. Cyber metrology is really difficult. But in the push for excellence in it, in the pursuit of excellence in it, you will get better. That goes to prioritizing. Prioritizing is definitely which are you going to do first. It also is in order that if I have to drop something, that's the first thing I'm dropping. Then that one, then that one, then that one. You can work it from the bottom up. And that prioritization, when it came in the city, it was not just a question of what do we think is going to be the greatest source of risk. It was also how many resources are going to be required here. And resources, mind you, is not just about money. This is super important. I'll get to this in the next one. But it's also about time, people effort. How much effort do we have to put towards this? So which one do we go after first? And maybe we only work on that one, and until that is done, then we go into the next one. Sometimes you can sequence them. There's a real eagerness to like, let's do all the things. To paraphrase Michael Porter, strategy sometimes is deciding what not to do. And the last, this one's crucial. I could spend a lot of time on this. Communication. It does not matter if I understand a thing if I cannot communicate that thing. It doesn't. It's cool that I understand this thing, but it doesn't matter if I can't communicate it. Why? Because ultimately, my goal, my job, is to change someone's behavior. I'm not going to be able to do that unless I can communicate effectively. Remember back to the first thing. Securing technology is about trust between humans. That comes through communication. And that communication isn't always going to be verbal. It's going to be like this. Might be over email. Might be over a text message. So how to figure out how best to communicate is to understand who decides, who is making the decision. One of the ways that I think about this is going to seem a little strange, but it's an exercise that I do all the time. I work with non-technical executives. I work with technical executives as well, but I work with non-technical executives, and I did here in the city. And the way I would think about that, in that case, was the mayor. If I needed to talk to the mayor has to make a decision, but does not understand the technical part, does not need to, should not need to. How do I inform the mayor to make a decision? And if you need an equivalent of this, you can choose the CEO of your company But I actually recommend, this is going to sound strange, choose the president of the United States, or whichever nation you are from, the head of state. Because there's urgency around that decision, there's import, there's not time to explain. I'm not saying that everything is a matter of staying present, but if you really need to distill down, how do I think about this? How would the president need to make a decision? She or he doesn't need to understand all the details. They need to make a decision. So being crisp about the communication and understanding that is really important. The last two are a bit related. Or sorry, this one is related to the one I just talked about. Find out how much the status quo costs. People overlook this a lot. When I was laying out a risk decision, by the way, let me pause real quick. I think I have the chat module open. I don't see any questions, which means either I have you wrapped in attention, questionable, or you're timid about questions, also questionable. But please pop some questions in, because in a few minutes, I'd really like to try and address them. Find out how much the status quo costs. This is really important. I was talking to someone the other day. How do you motivate a risk decision? How do you motivate a decision? Mind a risk decision in security, you can do whatever you want. Figure out what it costs to do what you're doing today. You can say, this is what it costs to implement this technology, and it's going to reduce risk by this much, and here's our other option. And here's what happens if we do nothing. Do nothing. Status quo. This is crucial. It's still going to cost. It costs something to keep that contract, to get the personnel to support it. And it costs something in that you're going to absorb some risk. You might not just pay for it today, you might pay for it later. Again, that's not a threat in any way. It's just planning out that cost is really crucial. It helps, number one, make a much more informed decision around risk appetite, and investment. And number two, articulate what is the cost of inaction. And this is going to vary by the business unit, by the agency, because again, it goes back to how they see the world and how they measure it. But finding out how much it costs to do nothing is really important. It's a boring essential of being an effective cybersecurity or cyber risk practitioner. Let's talk about the alternative. If you can't say how much it costs today, you can't evaluate if what the baseline is, what you're comparing against. You're saying either to the security lead or to another executive, we should invest X amount. And they should ask you back, and that is going to reduce my risk by how much? It's a very good conversation to have. The precursor to that, the precedent, is how much are we spending today? Really important to understand the full scope of costs. It is not just money. It is time and effort. And if you can even get some range of those, that's really powerful. And the last, this one is probably my hardest lesson, because it's one that I learned. It's one that I started to learn immediately and did not stop learning until the very end. So it was the longest learning, day one to last day. Everyone will tell you what wrong looks like when no one can tell you what right looks like. I had so many people say that that's not possible. We don't do that. That's not how it works here. We can't do that. Why would you do that? That's a terrible idea. And I learned to be aggressively curious. Aggressively curious. Empathetic, but aggressively curious. Okay, tell me why not. Well, we've tried it before. Okay, what did you try? Tell me about what you tried before. When did you try it? Maybe the situation has changed. Maybe the technology has changed. Now, this person won't go for it. All right, why won't they go for it? Really push and understand. How much does that person who's telling you no understand the obstacle that's in front of them? Have they mapped it? Do they really have the contours? Majority of the time they didn't. It was just an impression. They sort of pushed and went, oh, resistance. Nope, can't do it. But sometimes, and this is really, really important, they did. They pushed, they tried everything. They tried the right window, right people, right approach, multiple approaches. And the reason I say get aggressively curious is because then you can extract that learning. I was new to working for city government, no less the city of New York, but there were a lot of people around me who had been working for the city for a very long time and had tried a lot of things that didn't work. And I learned not from their mistakes, but from their trials, from their tests, so that when I tried something, I had a higher incidence of it not failing. Notice I didn't say success, it not failing immediately. But here is the thing. I encourage you today and future you, not to be discouraged when people say that is not possible. That doesn't work here. We can't do it. It's never been done. Part of the reason is because no one can tell you what right looks like. You have to chart that pathway. It is scary, but you know this. Courage is about doing things that you're afraid of, not having no fear. So I'll come back to these 6. I hope they have a different meaning now. Trust, scale, services, priorities, cost, and imagination. Again, I want to tell you that it was an honor to serve in this role, and it was hard. Part of the time I served was during the pandemic. And the same things that kept me up at night were the same things that got me up in the morning, which means I didn't sleep very much. But also, New York is a city that never sleeps. So that was okay. But I want to tell you this not from a perspective that's high and far away from you, but it's hopefully something that you can access and take with you in the work that you do today, and surely the work that you're going to be doing tomorrow and next year, next decade. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for spending this time with me. We have a few minutes if you have any questions, but I want to thank again the CyberSaint team for having me and giving me this chance. All right. I don't see any questions. Oh, wait, there are some questions. Oh, I had the module open, but there's chat. This is where people are asking questions. Okay, here we go. No questions, just thumbs up. Cool. All right, well, I'll hang for a minute or two in case anyone has any questions. I welcome them, but thank you again. Here we go. Sorry, question here. After you get everyone on board with risk appetite, how do you formalize and document in a way where it's easy to point to as to keep everyone working towards the same goal so no one forgets? Oof, this is a good question. I struggled with this about when do you document? So the premise of this question, after you get everybody on board with risk appetite, I don't know that I got everybody on board with risk appetite. I was moving. I think what I would say is risk appetite is something that, like culture, everybody understands, but is really hard to write down. What I did find helpful was 2 things. 1, scenarios. Scenarios are really helpful to articulate risk appetite. This kind of situation is one that we're not okay with, and that we can't go beyond the threshold. And also they were actionable, they were tied to our tabletop exercises, they were tied to other annual exercises, things that we did. The second is articulating impact, consequence. So again, back to cybermetrology and how you measure, it's not just about downtime, it's about what is the impact to the organization. Being able to articulate impact beyond this level, and I don't mean high, medium, low, I mean X number of dollars, Y number of days spent working on this, Z number of people pulled in off their business as usual onto this kind of thing, would set a relatively clear threshold of where our risk appetite was. So rarely formalized, always tried to document it in some way that someone who was not part of our thinking process could come in later, say, oh, I understand that. How often should risk metrics be evaluated? Great question. Depends on the metric. It really, really does. Some you want real time to get a constant picture of your threat landscape and to see how that's changing. Some you evaluate after big moments. Like everyone starts working from home, big moment, but also shift to summertime, big moment. So based on the changes in your organization, and then decisions that the organization is going to make otherwise. So if it's on a financial calendar or an academic calendar, tying some of the metrics and reporting to that is going to be really important. So it really does depend, but I hope that gives you some ideas. I know we're right at time, so thank you for your questions and thanks again for being here.